Okay, so as with all serious work, it's not only me. We are the Gela Techno group. I will not read the names, but you can see them. And the Divon tool development group. The upper group is financed by university, the lower by ministry. I will return to that. But in practice, our work overlap. So our research philosophy is to make not only academic models, but models that really work and are used, so that we do research not only on the properties of the models, but also on the use and consequences of the models. The talk is kept, as we all know, in the shadow of the chatbot. And one question that has been raised is, can AI rescue indigenous languages? So this question sounds so last year, right? When will our language be on Google? So this year, there's a totally different question. No one has asked this first question this year. This is, when will our language be on ChatGPT? And as we learned yesterday, perhaps it already is. And what do we find there? We find these billions of parameters and words needing much text. How much is, of course, a secret, but I read an article on BBC saying 300 billion words are fed into the ChatGPT system. And we heard that a tiny little grain of this is Icelandic. How much, we don't know, but there is, according to the Icelandic blog, 3.5 billion words of Icelandic text. Of course, I mean, we are all impressed by the Icelandic language community when it comes to this. So development is fast. So a reasonable strategy seems to be to wait, right? Perhaps we'll follow suit sometime next year in ChatGPT 7.0. So let's try to estimate the waiting time. So will large corpora come to the ones who wait? This is an overview over languages that I have been working with. The Finnish, Swedish, and Norwegian corpora, of course, are not. They've been made by others. So corpus in million words. So the Finnish and Swedish corpora are very well curated by the language banks of Finland and Sweden. They are analyzed and accessible. Norwegian one is bigger. That's because this is everything that has been published in Norway for the last 350 years. 20 billion words. Not openly accessible due to negotiations, but they have made a big language model out of this. For the other languages, we in Tromsø, together with colleagues, the Lovari, for example, colleagues in Stockholm, been collecting corpora that are considerably smaller. Looking at words per speaker, we see that the winner is Inari Sami. This is because this is perhaps the world's most successful revitalization project. I'll return to that. So if every language community were as productive as the Inari Samis, then this would be the numbers counting in millions. So as you can see, there are not that many millions to the right on this table. And so in the popular series Try This at Home, Robert Haido said that, okay, let's take 3.4 billion words text corpus. But you see the problem for the languages to the right of the table in the very beginning of the try yourself. How long will we then have to wait? The 400 speakers of Inari Sami have in 20 years produced 3.1 million words. So let's assume that the productivity now is more representative of optimal condition. So we have a yearly production of 350,000 words, which is high for 400 people, right? And let's say that a lower limit for usable large language model would be Icelandic, this tiny language we heard about yesterday. This means that this will bring Inari Sami on the level of Icelandic in 10,000 years from now. For this part of the talk, this is the most important point. And Inari Sami really is in the top of the small languages. So the real bottleneck is, of course, the numbers of speakers. So you add 1,000 times as many speakers, and it goes 1,000 times as fast to produce all this text. But what about Wikipedia, the staple food of machine learning systems? I had a look a couple of years ago for the circumpolar Wikipedia editions. So here are the languages. Out of 70 languages, 45 of them have a Wikipedia edition. So, and a little more than half of them contain more than 1,000 words. Now we're not talking about millions anymore, we're talking about 1,000 words. So the winner is Faroese. I'm only counting the minority languages here. The winner is Faroese with 1.4 million. So I ordered this according to continent. So you have the American situation to the left, the Russian situation in the middle, and the Nordic situation to the right. So the ones in Russia, except Vepsian, I will not go into that, they are republic languages they are the size of Icelandic or bigger, which sort of explains that Icelandic is not a typical 300,000 speaker language. These are also better than the typical 300,000 speaker languages because they have been subject to the very positive Soviet language policy, so they are all literate, contrary to Africa, for example. But still, for these Wikipedias, only 3 of them, or actually, 5, 6 of them have had native speakers writing on them. So there's a phenomenon I have called Wikipedia hijacking, where people who are very interested in, say, Inupiaq, but know nothing about it, write the Wikipedia in Inupiaq. Anyone knowing anything about Escalate languages know that this is a catastrophe. But this is on the first part of the catastrophe. The second part of the catastrophe is when machine learning people start making model out of this input. Okay, what about social media? Corpora showing question, answer, and dialogue, turn-taking are central for modeling conversation, right? So speakers of circumpolar languages all live in communities containing monolingual majority language speakers as well. So in order to have a discussion so that your classmates, say as a 17-year-old, also understand you, then you will do it in the majority language. There's one marginal exception, discussion on language issues. So if you want to discuss Irish, then you do it in Irish, right? So I did a survey on that. So for these exactly circumpolar Wikipedia languages, I looked at the discussion. All these languages had a discussion group or Facebook or in Russia on Kontakte, where they discussed issues concerning the language. So in North America, all the 9 languages the community discussed the language, but in English. In Russia, Buryat, Komi, Tuvan, and Khakas, all partly Sakha, discussed partly in Russian, but to a certain extent also in their own language. The 19 other Wikipedias languages only discussed in Russian. In the Nordic countries, it was better. So this is sort of, but this is only this topic. So this is not the Swedish corpus who have 500 million words on discussions on how to become a father, let alone how to become a mother. I mean, not how, but what, I mean, all the things that goes with it. Not the how, that's different groups. Yeah, you understand me. But this we don't have. Okay, when will then data-driven approaches work? Well, for a language society with much text available, and for dialogue modeling with dialogue and question answering data available, and a situation with a stable norm. Correct forms clearly outnumber incorrect ones. So my estimate is that for between 98 and 98.5% of the world's languages, none of these assumptions hold. So these are sort of the languages that I exclude. I think it will perhaps with the exception of Turkmen, which again has this Soviet language policy behind it, I don't expect the other ones to fulfill these criteria. In more general terms, data-driven proofing, for example, very simple thing, I may consider shortcomings as auto-vocabulary problems, but the assumption is that the text collection equals a norm, which excludes spelling reforms, for example, right? Because that's a sort of, you zero out everything you had. And also the people really must know the norm. So a colleague of mine, with colleagues again, did a spell checker evaluation test bench. So the point for his group was the spell checkers, but my point now is how well people are writing. And the interesting thing is to compare the amount of misspellings in Icelandic and in South Sami. Right? So with equally sized numbers, corpora, the Icelanders do 1,000 misspellings and the South Sami do 16,000 misspellings. In published texts. Okay, so this looks bad, right? So, should the 99% of us language communities just give in? And I would, okay, I'm here, so I say no. So our basic needs are different from this, the 1% language communities. And the way of fulfilling these needs then call for different methods. So no corpus doesn't imply no possibilities, no future, which it would, of course, with corpus-based methods. A quick side note about digital death. There is a Hungarian linguist who has introduced this. We not only face language death, we face digital language death. No digital presence of circumpolar languages, for example, or African languages, means that they will die digitally. I think this is a false analogy with language death, using the edges or the Fishman scale on digital presence. Because a language with no speakers is in trouble, but a language with no text but speakers is in a totally different situation. For example, in a situation of colonial language oppression, like we have in Africa, right? With the official language being different from the language of the people. Or, you know what's going on here up north. So, what is needed for indigenous languages? Perhaps no literacy. Who are we to say that they should make a standard written language? Well, I'm not. If they don't want, I won't interfere. But then, in order to pass on the language to new generation, in order to do revitalization, you will need a written form. So then, what is needed? To read, the letters must be in Unicode. To write, there will be a need of keyboards, good keyboards, proofing tools, grammar checkers, access to the vocabulary. This is not trivial. Look at the Komi Wikipedia in Russia. They have two non-Russian letters, E and Ö. And 2/3 of the text is written so that whenever they come to an E or an Ö, and the Ö is the most common vowel, they change keyboard to a Latin keyboard, write Ö, and change back to a Cyrillic keyboard and continue. I mean, this is masochism. This is very bad. So, and we need grammatically based call, since we cannot rely upon immersion for revitalization. So, are these resources in place? Well, for some, so again, we have this 1%, right? With the language pack and the Google Translate. So this is from an old slide today. I would have had these secret statistics about the ChatGPT, which I don't have. So with 7,500 languages, half of them have at least, it should be the other way around, but at least, so approximately half of these languages have serious orthography. So making the New Testament doesn't come lightly, since, I mean, even though these languages have no status, they get the status of God sort of into the Bible work. So God doesn't make spelling mistakes. So this will require serious linguistic work, which for me as a linguist is they and the Soviet communists, the missionaries and the Soviet communists, they are the one that really did something for minority languages. Okay, but the big tech companies did not. So between 95 and 97.5% of the world's actively written languages are without any computer support, even though the communists and missionaries supported them. So what do we do in Tromsø then? As I said, the Norwegian Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, together with our 2-3 persons from the UIT, has financed a group of approximately 10 permanent positions for the last 15, 20 years. We also have people we work with, some of them here in the audience. So we really don't do all this alone, but we have been making knowledge-based models for close to 40 languages and experimented with many more. I think we have 160 languages in our infrastructure, but some of them really are just experiments. The core idea is to keep language-independent, language-dependent code separate, and have a common infrastructure. And so this is the philosophy. If you have time in the x-axis and performance in the y-axis, then, as we all know, when we start upon something new, the first very long time consists of finding out what's going on and try and error and start again and everything. So, and we have done that for 20 years, and now our sort of offer is to start here. Start where little work gives much progress. So then you get, if you measure, for example, coverage of text, what you are able to correctly identify and analyze, and this is an adjective in the weak declension dative singular. So then up to 85% coverage is a quite quick thing, but then you use the rest of the life to get to 98.5. Okay, so some URLs here. GLLT GitHub.io is, so we are on GitHub. Grammar models resource is documentation and source code. Divo have a downloadable installer for proofing tools and keyboards. And the GLA Techno page tells about research publications, and it has online analyzers, e-dictionaries, and some MT. So if you have a look at, for example, this one, yes. So here we'll have source code, tool developments, and how to use these things, and the infrastructure documentation of the language models. So if I, for example, say according to geography, so this is very fantastic, right? Very many languages. But if I instead say according to how good the code is, then the really good, then there is not that good. And you see where we are at, and here you can find the documentation on the languages, and here you can find the source code. Yes, where were we? Here. And yeah, you can have a look for yourself. The infrastructure then contains a core component of common scripts, the yellow one, a set of templates for adding new languages, and then the green one set of files for each individual languages. So we have the lexicon, we have the morphophonological rules, and so on. And also some common, for example, for all the languages of Russia, we would then have a set of international and Russian names in Cyrillic. For the languages used in the Nordic countries, we have the geographical names and person names of the Nordic linguistic sphere and so on. And then auto tools, well, this is computer is, to configure builds and support portability. So I will build in one way on a Mac and in another way on Linux or Windows, and I will build only the analyzers, or also the spell checkers, only the normative, and so on. And then tools to compile the different components. And these components, we work on complex languages with little or no text, we'll see. That is, we work on average languages. And what we do is we work on finite state transducers for the word-based grammar. And for lemmatization and syntactic analysis, we use constraint grammar. So this we integrate in different programs then. So the finite state transducer, the thing is that we combine a concatenative model of the grammar, the stem and the lemma and the grammatical tags, pair that with the stem and the affixes and also trigger symbols. And then we have a separate component that does the autosegmental morphology. So, for example, in Sami, the distinction between nominative accusative is not one of a suffix. It was a suffix historically, but now it's only an alternation in the stem. So we have this quasi-suffix saying weak rate, and then we have a rule saying shorten the geminate in weak rate, and then we glue these two together. So what this comes out of it is a transducer that can go either from gussa, meaning cow, it's a loan word, gussa accusative to gussa, or from gussa to gussa accusative. The constraint grammar then is a bottom-up syntactic parser. So for the sentence mi ätlätan muitalan, we haven't told it. We have a rule set saying that in this and this context, this analysis is the best. Actually, it's quite psycholinguistically real. How do you know as an English speaker that walk is a noun and not a verb? Well, because the previous word is the and not we. If it were we, then it would have been a verb, but if it's the, then it's a noun. So this is the philosophy behind it. And then we also add syntactic and dependency analysis to it. We can also add error. I will return to that. So the universal dependency tagger for North Sami was actually trained on a corpus tagged by this program. So what we do then is that we have this morphological foundation, the syntactic and dependency thing on top of it, and from this we have a pipeline for building these different tools. Intelligent dictionaries that can understand morphology and send the lemma to the dictionary. So we have click in text and ICALL and machine translation and so on. So, for example, spell checkers. In order to build a spell checker, you go through this short 10-point list. But in this 10-point list, 9 of the points are language independent. So that they are a part of our infrastructure. So your work as a linguist working on your language would be point 2. So that's the idea. Another one, a dialogue ICALL. So this is a system-governed dialogue and not a user-governed dialogue. So this says hello, and then the system say, I'm moving into a new house. Could you help me? And then the user says, yes, I could help you. And then the dialogue say, okay, I have a TV. Where do you have a TV? And then the user said something. The thing is that when the user says something, then the system corrects it. So, for example, then the system says, in what room should we put my TV? And this is someone here that wants to fool the system and says that we put the TV in the toilet. Okay, there is but the thing is that the toilet is put in the locative. So the system says that, okay, the answer should contain an illative. And how does the system know? Because to the left you see an analysis where we have taken the system question, and then there is this QDL tag in the middle, and then we see the answer. Since the system knows what's the question, then the system also knows what to expect from the answer. And then we have a list, a rule mapping a missing illative tag to the initial question word if there is no illative in the answer. And here there's no illative in the answer, and that again will prompt a message. And most of the world's languages, approximately in these areas, you can see I'm not very good at computer graphics, I only found the circle. But approximately here they are so rich morphology that list-based things are not a good idea. Okay, how would a knowledge-based project, a grammar-based project be run? Well, actually, for at least half of the world's languages, there is one or more persons being a linguist, a missionary, or both, that spends his or her entire life working on this language. There will also be language experts and activists, and so then comes the programmer. So the thing is that the language activist, expert, and the philologist will have common interests in a grammatically based project. The linguist because it's grammar, and the activist because it will give the tools he or she wants. So they will then have come with words, language in use, and with grammar. Together with the programmer, they will then make a computational model of the language, which, with the infrastructure, can make all these programs. But then it's not enough. 15 years ago, I had a survey of ICALL dialogue systems. I found 20, and none of them in use. So we can't stop here, right? Like these 20 systems did. So you have to go one step further. So this is then what we actually spend quite a lot of time making this possible. Others may do it differently. That's fine. As long as your language model does what you want and you can put it into use, this last stage. So what we do is openly available for adaptation and reuse. So that's it. And the take-home message here is what you need is a good grammar, a comprehensive dictionary, and some authentic text. So there is no need to wait 10,000 years. And the output will be as reliable as you make it. You will have no cut-through surprises because your model has, as a colleague of mine said, there's no need to guess if you know. And we do know this because this is an instance of U-umlaut that should be part of our model for Icelandic. So the next problem is then access to major programs. So the single most important tool for literacy development, for example, making textbooks. So one thing is the code, but you need a textbook, and in order to have a textbook, you have to write it, and you would like it to be consistent. And how can it be consistent without a literary tradition? Well, a spell checker will come in handy. So Microsoft Word and Google Docs are the two major word processors, and we see a clear trend that Microsoft makes it harder and harder to include third-party proofing tools to their programs. The 25 years I've been looking at this, it has become harder. And Google doesn't allow it. We have a workaround for Google, but it's not nice, but it's there. So the most central common infrastructure of any society, its language, is then, in this scenario, outside the control of its own society, which is unacceptable. So should we then forget about big tech? And no, we should definitely know, but we should not be governed by it. We should not sit down and wait. So what we need is then an independent language technology, both from the arbitrary corpus and from the big companies. So the corpus, as we use it, it's not our vehicle, but our reality therapy. So what is the relation between linguistic usage, with real usage, and our grammar-based model? So this is for development, right? And what is the relation between linguistic usage and the language norm? This is for our colleagues in the Minority Language Standardization Board that should not be tempted to standardize things that the language community would never accept. So this dialogue must be there. So that is the important use of corpus. So consequences for language policy would be that, okay, we cannot accept that these things are outside our control. So the computer programs must adjust to humans and not vice versa, right? So the big tech companies want to carry the infrastructure of our society. So when Norwegian government emails were hacked, I don't want to speculate by whom, then it wasn't actually the Norwegian government that was hacked, it was the Norwegian government's Microsoft email server. So this means that it is actually Microsoft that carries the infrastructure of my university, of my government, but they don't do it for. Norway has decided that it's we have 8 official languages, 2 Norwegian ones, 3 Sami ones, 2 Romani ones, and Kven. And then we cannot say that if Microsoft then wants to carry the infrastructure of our society, then our society is all these languages. Yes. So they cannot treat language as if it were a commodity and have a cost-benefit thing, because in the cost-benefit thing we will always be out, right? But it's not a commodity. It's what constitutes a society. So let's, at the end here, okay, I'm going a bit too fast. Sorry. So I've been thinking of L2 language teaching types. So we started out, of course, with classical languages. My aunt, for example, had Old Norse at her gymnasium as a classical language. These were taught with no intention to speak it. For English, when I studied English as a child, we had to learn 5 and 5 strong verbs by heart for every lesson. My kids did not have to do that. That's, of course, because the way they learn English is totally different from the way I learn English. Which also makes it problematic to use English as a fruit fly for language teaching, because, I mean, the setting is so different. Then we have the traditional foreign languages. When I was 16, I thought that, okay, in order to grow up and become a young man, I have to know English, German, and French. That's what it is. Again, my children don't think the same way, which means that the teaching of these languages are under pressure, and also, of course, since the German and French are better in English now than they used to be, still I will need the scientific literature in German, and to access West and North Africa I will need French, but anyway, this is under pressure. Then the national language is to be learned by immigrants. We heard much about Icelandic, so I won't repeat this here. And then we have the newcomers. When Michael Kraus wrote his article in 1991, the world's languages are dying, then you had this. You could have 3 reactions, right? Ignore it, go on, work with whatever you work with, English. Or you could say, okay, now we have to document whatever is there before it dies. Or, and that wasn't the most obvious answer at the time, we should stop this process. We should stop the language dying process, and we should revitalize. And also, Michael Kraus's forecast has been proved very wrong. It's not so that 95% of our languages will disappear in this century. On the contrary. So there are studies about that, and they say, okay, 1/5 perhaps, and so on. But I don't say that revitalization is easy. As a matter of fact, I only know one successful story in Arisami, but maybe more, but this one is. But anyway, thinking of those then, English and the national languages to be learned by immigrants, they are cases where immersion is available. So there is no alternative to English for me for this session. All of you wouldn't understand, say Swedish or German would be two alternatives, but that wouldn't go. So it doesn't matter how bad my English is, because it's the only alternative, right? So which of course makes my English better, because I have to practice it in order. Yeah. So also the same goes for the national languages. If I come from Somalia and know, say, both Somali and Oromo, but not English, then my alternative out there will be Icelandic. Very, very good for my Icelandic. So this will then have consequences also for the teaching. So where immersion is not available or not readily available. So for example, for me as a 16-year-old studying German and French at school, I never made it to France or Germany. I could, but I didn't. And with the indigenous and minority languages, even though I would live in northern Norway, the Samis would then speak to me in Norwegian and not in Sami, since my Sami would be too bad in the beginning, and also since I'm not a Sami, or even if I were a Sami, their ideology would be then that, okay, you didn't learn it from the beginning, so you're lost. We speak Norwegian to you, right? So the thing to do then is to have a grammar-based instruction to prepare for later immersion, so that I now can go to France and get up to speed with French. I mixed it with Russian because I know these two languages equally bad, but I know that I will be able to do it. And I did it with German, and we have experiences with Inari Sami that it works well. First, learn the formal system, and then when you are able to say something sensible but unidiomatically wrong, then you can go to immersion. Yeah, and you must understand, of course, how a typologically very different language works. For example, North American languages who are different, to put it that way, from Germanic languages. Conclusion. Language planning must stand above actual language use. So even if we were to wait 10,000 years, we wouldn't be so happy with the outcome. Because we wouldn't necessarily be thinking that what the Wikipedia and others writer would be a good representation of the language. So this will call for an explicit, transparent, and independent language technology. No black boxes, no waiting for the big tech companies. Such a language technology is today threatened from two sides. From the dominant trend within AI saying that if the computer can't learn it, we can't do anything with it. And from the major programming houses that prevent third-party language technology programs to be integrated in the word processor software. To the last point, for example, I've been sitting with the Norwegian Ministry of Culture and had Nordic representatives from Microsoft and Google discuss what to do and what consequences it would have. So, for example, localization of Microsoft Office into both Norwegian languages came very quickly when the Norwegian government says that administrative programs should be subject to the Norwegian law on education, because the Norwegian law on education say that any textbook must be available in both the Norwegian languages at the same time and the same price. So then they listened. But actually we don't want Microsoft to build a norm for South Sami. The South Samis want to build that norm themselves. So it's not so that, please, Google, fix it for us. It's so that give us access to the places where we want to be with our models and our standards and our solutions. And for CALL, minority languages need reliable programs, no copter, already now. So, thank you.